A pleasure to meet all at last, and today, for films I should have talked about years ago, there's certainly many others that have unfortunately not met very good ratings or financial success. But it ultimately doesn't matter because cult followings have been considered a primary mainstay in ensuring that certain films, for instance, get the recognition they deserve. Another big example of which that had unfortunately not done so well critically or financially is Speed Racer. Yes, I finally get to talk about this piece despite having seen it before. A few times at least. I gave it another rewatch recently just to refresh it up in my mind, and now I'm more than confident that I'd be able to talk about it. Well, here we go. Speed Racer is of course a live action / animated adaptation about the iconic anime from the 1960s, Speed Racer. The fact that it took about 40 years for Warner Brothers to come around and eventually make a film about it is one thing. The fact that they hired such actors like Emil Hirsch and John Goodman is another thing, but even more crazy is just the fact that the way they had the animation segments done, it practically feels like a modern mix of anime and CG. I mean, some might look at the CG a little weirdly, and I'll admit, it looks a bit different than I had originally imagined, but in the same regard as to how other animated films have had their share of CG, some of which just happen to look better than others. And Speed Racer unavoidably actually does have a unique little feel to it, like a CG animated manga film. Which of course is the same sort of thing as anime, but still. Speed Racer follows along a young boy in school known as Speed Racer. It's not only a titular role, but it is the name of the main protagonist. It's not exactly a main name or a legal name, so to speak, but we do kick off things in his classroom in which that he has some time studying and basically does little roleplay visualizations in his mind, where he is the ultimate race car driver. His brother Rex Racer apparently picks him up from school in the ever so beloved Mach 4, a red, speedy car in which that would eventually become the iconic Mach 5. After a few upgrades and even a livery design would go through, we do fast forward to the present. However, for about 10 minutes of the film or so, we do bounce back and forth between the past and the present, by which that Speed Racer is participating in one of his first major victories. And while he is considered to be a seasoned racer by this point, especially when you consider the fact that the many Grand Prix he's went through over the years, it's no wonder why he gotten a lot of notoriety over the years. But a good part of that is the reason why the family, known as the Racer family, Racer Industries, of course, is the company responsible for not only manufacturing the Mach 5, but has also been responsible for maintaining itself as a good, small, solid business. Meanwhile, we do bounce back and forth, again, between the past and the present, and a few other key moments in the past will include what happened when Speed Racer's brother Rex Racer ends up getting killed. Yeah, so apart from the number of things that happened, even meeting up with his now girlfriend, Trixie, Speed Racer, of course, has had a lot going on in his life, and he has been through plenty, leading up to the point in which that he would secure a massive victory that, of course, would be looked at by various other people, including one key figure that we'll talk a bit about in a bit. Other than that, though, Speed Racer is probably comfortable knowing that his presence and his performance is one of a kind, unlike many others. He seemingly is unmatched because of his skills and the courage needed to win, mostly fueled by the death of his brother Rex. However, there is, of course, a man who would walk up to him. This man, of course, would be known as Mr. Royalton, played by Roger Allam. Speed Racer himself, of course, is played by Emil Hirsch, and then you have Mom Racer and Pops Racer, played by Susan Sarandon and John Goodman, respectively, as well as a younger brother known as Sprittle. And there's even a monkey in the group. Yeah, so the cast of Speed Racer is honestly pretty well done for what it is. And When they all get together with this Royalton guy, especially after he lands his craft in the middle of their lawn, he's invited inside and discusses a little sponsorship deal. A deal of which that would supposedly allow Racer Industries and the entirety of the Speed Racer family itself to merge with the likes of the massive corporate giants known as Royalton Industries. And so, after a good long amount of time, even being bribed with an official work suit that Speed Racer himself would actually test fit, the thing is, a lot of dialogue goes on between him and Royalton, and eventually gets to the point in which that Royalton himself becomes rather frustrated and eventually agitated. Speed Racer, of course, goes on as far to decline the offer. And so, this practically seals the deal, not just for Racer Industries, but for the fact that the Royalton Industries giant itself is seemingly going to be targeting the Racer Industries in a number of ways. There, of course, are many other attempts to bring down Racer Industries, not just coming from Royalton, but from other people as well. But before we get to most of the rivalry between Royalton and Racer Industries, there, of course, comes a little situation. In a room, a man is being beat up in an interrogation room of some sorts. Some kind of fancy office. But it turns out that it's on wheels. A big rig is apparently being hunted by some car that's traveling behind them and eventually in front of them. The hostage that's inside the trailer gets tossed out while the truck itself gets away. The car does pick up the man whom is known as Tejo Tokokan. And this person is essentially revealed to be Racer X. He, of course, doesn't say very much about what goes on, and he's also played by Scott Porter. But in any other way that you look at it, though, we do get ourselves a good cinch of what goes on. When Racer Industries is basically approached with a lot of things to do in mind. There apparently is a cross-country rally known as the Crucible. This series of races is supposed to determine whom is going to make the win and earn a good spot in terms of their status as a company. Racer Industries, of course, has been facing some problems, not just with what was happening with Royalton Industries, but eventually Racer X actually pays a visit to the Racer household, and he, as well as a detective, discuss things with Speed in an effort to hopefully give him a position available as part of a team whom are not only out to go after Royalton Industries, believing that there is some sort of scandal going on. However, both of the Racer parents disapprove of this almost instantly. Racer himself ends up going on a so-called skiing trip when really it's a classic diversion move, where he and Trixie would both make their way out to the Crucible rally entirely. So the series of races would kick off, and while Sprittle and the monkey are basically watching some things on TV, thankfully doing their best to not allow the secret to get out, it does seem that both Pops and Mom Racer are not exactly on the fence of things. They themselves are pretty frustrated, to the point in which that they do not even allow Sprittle to watch the races that are going on with the Crucible, even though Sprittle even confesses to them that Speed himself is in the series. Yeah, as you can tell, this lie that Speed told to his parents is going to land him in a lot of trouble. But, nevertheless, with a lot of obstacles to go through, as well as some members that have been met up over the years, there, of course, is the one and only Cannonball Taylor, with his infamous GRX, number 66. But apart from all the rivalries that Speed encounters and creates along the way, while trying to win his first race in the Crucible, it sure is a sight to behold. Because as it would eventually turn up, Royalton Industries, alongside many others, have apparently been rigging the races to ensure that they themselves secure the win, causing it to become a rather big challenge for Speed himself. The rest of his team, which are practically led by Tejo Tokokan after his confession to Racer X as well as eventually going up to Speed and Trixie, letting them both know about what's happened to him, and the suspicions that he's had against Royalton Industries, alongside many other large corporate giants that apparently are ruling over the racing series. It all leads up to an incredible battle, the underdog of the fight being Speed himself. Seen as a legendary racer by this point, it made sense that he of course was going to be a big target against certain companies. And of course, he's practically run like a crazy bounty hunter play, with all these other racers in mind, and all these other characters that seemingly have little connection to the plot or storyline, are mostly just there for being rivals. In the later races of the Crucible, however, the stakes would only continue to be raised even higher beyond most expectations. So you can tell that throughout the rest of the film, Speed is taking on a number of different challenges, and as we see more animation come around, especially in the racing sequences, since I can only imagine it would have been hard to have live action models of each car from the Speed Racer franchise. Not to mention, the marketing ploy basically expanded out of the movie and turned itself into a hit racing game on the Nintendo Wii, and eventually a lot of different toys were put together, some track sets and other things. It was mainly a Hot Wheels endorsement, pretty much. Other than that though, the whole rest of the film just circumnavigates around the many things the Speed Racer has to go through and all the incredible pieces when it comes to live action animation. I mean, you have a lot of segments that might look a little crappy by today's standards, but it's 2008. Practically when CG was practically almost at its peak. It does seem in some ways that maybe a few things could have been tweaked here and there, and some improvements could have also been made, but the thing is, adapting from an anime, or anything really, is a bit of a challenge in and of itself. Mainly because some people have high expectations on certain things, or maybe it's because of the reputation that some companies are known to do, where they essentially get far away from the source material in order to make it more believable, quote unquote. Why that needs to be implemented with every film is beyond me. You know, adapting a film straight out of a movie, or out of a show, or out of a comic book, or out of anything really, it's something not everybody is able to accomplish. Yet at the same time, the same decade, there were a number of other adaptations based on other things. I mean, you had The Incredible Hulk come out that same year in 2008. And not too many people were excited about this one because it was one of the first MCU installments, and they sort of had a few hurdles they needed to cross before they truly knew what they were doing. And on top of all that, you had some other original projects, which apparently proved to be way more hardier than expected. So hardy, in fact, that some of them are in fact getting sequels. I'm sure The Incredibles will come out with a third film at some point, but only time will tell when that will truly show down. Anyways though, by the time the final race goes down, the final piece of the Crucible takes place, the Mach 5 gets itself an upgrade into the incredible Mach 6. A bit of streamlining as well as some other tweaks in the design and power, and the car itself is all ready to roll. And you can especially consider the fact that Speed's own mechanic in mind, as well as his many friends, families, and other such supporters, have really brought him up to the point in which that he gets to face against the one and only Jack Cannonball Taylor. Yeah, he of course was somebody that Speed himself had met prior to his discontinuation of his little plan with Royalton. I mean, you could say that in addition to turning down Royalton Industries' offer for a merger, he not only made Royalton himself pretty angry, but many other people as well. So you could say Royalton was really hoping to pin Speed against the wall and not allow him to go any further. But Speed himself knew what he was doing. And after a lot of rough tussles alongside Cannonball Taylor, his car does stop for some time, eventually ending up in last place. But he of course will eventually make up for lost time, and by the time he does get towards the final stretch, he remembers a lot that has gone down, a lot of things that were told to him, and most importantly, the growth that he's made since the very day his brother, unfortunately, didn't make it out of a massive crash. So with all of this in mind, he puts the pedal to the metal and races to the finish line and wins. Royalton Industries is practically on their knees because of this huge victory that Speed Industries has done. Racer Industries is practically sitting on the top by this point, but Speed himself is more than just simply grateful about the win. He, of course, has had a lot of motivation and a lot of courage and honesty needed in order to get such a big ordeal like this well into control here. So, of course, that's how he secures his win in a fantastic way. So I will say that Speed Racer, for a film like this, it actually did really well. Even if it doesn't look nearly as incredible as it could be today, one can only imagine how would one be able to adapt an anime film like that today. I mean, there's been lots of unique innovations and ways to animate certain things in a certain animation style, but to adapt an anime like that today might take a bit more courage and effort in order to make it happen. Not only for the fact that some people are still having high expectations about what the final product should be like, but also because you don't want the film to just look good, you want it to feel good too, like you're right back in the 1960s. And we're certainly not going so far to say that they should actually go to the exact same animation methods that they used back then when there were pretty much no computers, at a commercial level at least. But no, they could at least give us some nostalgia points so that way we could at least feel like we're in that point. That's the main thing about an adaptation. You not only want people to return to a certain point in history, but you want people to at least get a feel for what it was like then, for the challenges that Speed himself went through and all the races he's done. And it sure is a bit of a challenge to work with. Even now, when you can make a film as simply put as putting a few things together in an editing process, some texts, some scene work, and of course getting the dialogue and soundtrack to all come together properly. Of course, it might seem like a lot of hard work, but they really make it look so simple nowadays. With a lot of people working out there in the film industry, it's no wonder why we can have sequels pop up in as little as a year nowadays. Anyways though, I don't have very much more to say about this, but Speed Racer 2008 does at least deserve a good score by my part. So, a 7.6 out of 10.1. While I can't really say this is masterpiece material either, like some other bits, I'd still say that it's important for most people to come check this one out. It may not be anything like the anime, but because of what Speed Racer 2008 has done, it not only pushed up the marketplace to have more Speed Racer related material, especially knowing that there was Fast and the Furious and Hot Wheels out around, that might have been one of the main reasons why Speed Racer hadn't got as much of a repetition as it truly deserved, because the market was already oversaturated with a lot of racing stuff. You had Gran Turismo, you had Grand Theft Auto, of course, as well as the likes of Disney Pixar's Cars. And apart from anything else I could mention right now, that's just the thing. There's been a lot of racing and car related stuff in the marketplace, as well as media, so not much more to say here other than all that, but I will again be coming back here very soon for more films that I definitely could have talked about years ago, but now I have a good chance to talk about certain other films. So I'll see you guys then with another piece.